Have you ever watched a movie and either really enjoyed it or thought it was serviceable enough, but then when the ending rolls around, it's just bad? Either the ending is baffling with its decision making, or the execution is just an all-around ill-fitting ending to what the movie or TV show was otherwise going for. That is an issue, unfortunately, I see rather frequently with a lot of films and TV shows. Star vs., the ending to Lost, the ending to Game of Thrones. It just goes on, and it seems I'm not alone in most of these circumstances. It seems like the critical consensus with a lot of these is that the endings just suck. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people talk about a movie or TV show enthusiastically, but then say that it fumbled the ending or really fell off in the last part. Womp womp. Now there's a lot of reasons for this to happen. Sometimes it's the writer or writers' vision. Other times it's due to censorship or studio involvement. Either way, it is a real shame and very aggravating when the ending we feel we want or deserve doesn't come to fruition. Sometimes I can agree with divisive endings if it's something that fits the world and the overall themes. It is an important distinction that an unpopular ending doesn't necessarily mean it is a bad ending. However, that is not the case with the movie I am talking about today, Parker Finn's Smile from 2022. Now, I've reviewed Smile previously. Go check out my video if you haven't seen it and come back. Please, it could really use the views. Plus, I mean, look at this thumbnail. It's amazing. Ryu's so good. Anyway, you good? Y'all saw the video? Great. The sequel is out probably today. I don't really know when this is being released, so we'll see. But my thoughts on the first film as a whole were pretty mixed. I enjoyed a lot of the movie, but thought that it had an over-reliance on obvious jump scares throughout the film and had a couple of unintentionally funny moments that cheapened the experience.
You're going to die! You're going to die! You're going to die! You're going to die!
The ending bugged me a lot too, where it tried to be cerebral and have a message and moral, but then threw it all away in favor of a monster wins scenario. If you haven't seen Smile, I recommend that you take a look because unlike the review, I will be getting into spoilers here directly with the ending. All good? Here we go. Smile is an interesting movie in that the monster itself is an embodiment of trauma or PTSD and is used as a metaphor for how trauma spreads and quote-unquote infects others who witness it. The film follows a psychiatrist named Rose who is haunted by this entity after witnessing one of her clients self-off themselves in front of her, watching the entity appear as smiling people or voices on the phone and getting increasingly aggressive in order to break Rose down emotionally along with her relationships with her family and potential romances. This film is a follow-up to one of Parker Finn's previous shorts called Laura Hasn't Slept, which follows the client Rose watched violently end herself, have a nightmare where she is stalked by a smiling entity that wants to show her its face and hurt her. I think it's a pretty decent short with an effective scare, but I think it also shows that this creature wasn't originally meant to be a trauma metaphor at all, which might help to explain the ending. To shift the story to a full-length film, the entity had to be expanded upon and changed a little bit more, which is how the offing oneself or causing extreme scary violence came about. Monsters have rules, just like everything else after all. Even overpowered creatures have rules, like Pennywise has rules. But in so expanding the trauma monster, the creature became a metaphor, like a physical embodiment of trauma responses in people, which is awesome. I think that's a really great idea, and it's such a strong metaphor that is used decently throughout the movie, but not enough, in my opinion, and again, unintentionally funny at times.
You're going to die! You're going to die! You're going to die! You're going to die!
This issue mostly comes to a head during the film's climax. Skipping ahead, Rose cannot go through with committing a violent act to shift the entity's curse to someone else, so she instead returns to her abandoned family home where she suffered her original long-lasting trauma at the hands of her abusive, drug-addicted mother, because if Rose is alone, she cannot pass the entity to someone else. That's one of the rules. She either has to off herself in front of someone or do a violent act in front of witnesses promises to shift the curse to someone else. Quick pause, because I absolutely love this setup and the following scene up until a certain point. In this decayed building that very clearly was a family home that nobody's been in for decades, the entity appears as Rose's mother, essentially allowing Rose to confront her past trauma that has tortured her silently for years. It's revealed that Rose felt obligated to help her mother after her older sister Holly abandoned the two of them once she turned 18. I'll get into that shortly, which forced a very young Rose to take care of their mother by herself, who again was drug addicted and abusive and bedbound, it looked like. When her mother starts to overdose one day, Rose refuses to call for help and allows her mother to pass away, seeing it as a way of freeing herself from her mother's abuse. Obviously, Rose feels a lot of guilt and blames not just herself, but her sister as well, who had left because she couldn't handle the abuse their mother had put on her and had to protect herself, leaving, I believe Rose was 12 then, in their mother's care, which, oh no. This confrontation with the entity in her mother's form is interesting, as it can be seen in several ways. In the most likely case, due to how the rest of the movie plays out, the entity could just be using the mother's form to torture Rose even further, to push her towards the brink even faster. However, I personally think the better way to look at it is to see it as a test. Trauma of all kinds is difficult and can be incredibly overwhelming to people depending on what the trauma is. In Rose's case, she repressed a lot of that initial trauma and took a job as a psychiatrist in order to try and help others with their trauma and inner demons, probably because she couldn't do it for herself or her sister. You could also say it was a way of subconsciously trying to force herself to understand her own trauma. There's a few interpretations here. In this way, the entity breaking her down so much and forcing Rose to confront her trauma literally can be viewed as a test, or a form of therapy in itself, confrontation therapy. Rose must either overcome her trauma or be consumed by it. I wildly prefer this interpretation of the story, not just because it's my own, but because it makes so much more sense for what I believe this entity to be and to represent. Rose confronts the trauma, and when it is shown that she is starting to understand and forgive herself for what she did to her mother, the entity attacks Rose, causing a fire. Rose uses this opportunity to light the entity ablaze and exits the run-down house, watching it go up in smoke and flame, which makes for great symbolism for how Rose is overcoming her trauma and growing as a person. See, she initially refuses to sell the house earlier in the movie because it was the last thing of her mother that she had, and likewise a symbol of her guilt. And even despite Holly trying to sell the house, she now thinks it's okay to let it burn. Rose accepts what she did and can now move past it, letting go with the trauma monster burning away inside. The film continues to its resolution from here, following Rose go back to her boyfriend's flat as she tries to explain and make amends to him. I really like this part as well, as she finally opens up, explaining her past trauma, how she was scared to open up, and in so doing cut people off, and how that wasn't fair to the boyfriend or her family or job family, etc. It's all really smart, healthy things to finally see Rose admitting to, setting her on the path to recovery and healthier behaviors. But then the first twist happens where she looks up and sees her boyfriend smiling menacingly at her. Oh no, it's the entity again, who speaks with his voice and says,
"I'll stay with you forever."
And honestly, that's a really good twist. It's fantastic and strong and shows just how trauma lingers. Even if we feel like we overcame it in some way, it can still come back. Honestly, this would have been a fine place to end the movie, but the film isn't done, unfortunately. I hate this next twist. Rose tries to run away from the entity in the form of her boyfriend, finding out that all of it was a hallucination and that she was still in her mother's abandoned house. It was not set ablaze after all, and it was revealed that the entity was just wasting time until the actual boyfriend could arrive, having tracked Rose through her phone. Terrified, Rose runs back to the house and locks the door, trying to keep the boyfriend out so as not to pass the curse onto him. The entity appears to Rose as a distorted version of her mother, tall and lanky with wide eyes. It does look pretty good. It rips off its face, revealing its true form to be a bloody humanoid with multiple sets of jaws and smiles. Oh, it's gross. Rose is put into a trance upon seeing this, and the entity ends up crawling into her open mouth to possess her. By the way, this is a practical setup. The monster here is a real costume, and the rose head with the stretchy mouth is a practical prop. That's really damn cool, and one of the standouts of this movie. But the movie does end with Rose being possessed. The boyfriend breaks into the home and finds Rose has doused herself in gasoline while holding a matchbox and smiling at him. She then sets herself on fire as he watches, passing the curse on to him, and the film ends. I hate this ending. I really do. Don't get me wrong, the practical effects and the monster's true form reveal is awesome. It looks really creepy and gross, and the imagery of it crawling into Rose's mouth is disgusting in all the best ways, but the whole scene just feels wrong to me. A lot of people seem to really like this ending, and I don't know why, besides maybe just the practical look of everything. I don't mind negative endings in movies, especially horror movies. Bad guy wins scenarios can be fun or devastating if done correctly, but this feels cheap and unearned. Rose was doing everything right and showing real growth in the metaphor, so it feels wrong to strip that away from her. If she had no agency to begin with, why fool the audience into thinking she did? In doing so, it cheapens the experience and makes the audience, or rather just me because I can see it, annoyed. I came out of this movie really thinking about this creature. I thought it was very interesting, but strange. If this monster was just a monster, why could it talk? Why would it torture its victims with personal attacks and experiences of loved ones or hallucinations? Why not just scare them? Rose has several conversations with this thing, so it is sentient. It has a goal. Why doesn't it just rip its face off sooner and possess Rose or tell her to commit an atrocity to get rid of it? That seems like what it wants. Later on, it even knows she would go somewhere secluded, so why would it let her do that? It doesn't make sense. It can look like other people and throw her off the trail to go do something else, so it doesn't make any sense that she would go somewhere secluded and wait out the curse. It does have a timer for some reason, but no one really cares about the timer, so whatever. I wouldn't have as many issues if this entity wasn't shown to be sentient and relied more on monster rules, like the succubus creature of It Follows. That monster has a similar mechanic too. For those that don't know, It Follows features another metaphor monster, this time for STDs, being a curse spread through sexual intercourse. The monster is invisible to everyone but its victim and will change shapes to random people or people the victim knows and will follow them endlessly until it is able to grab them and kill them and then move on to someone else. The succubus, however, doesn't talk and instead seems to work based off pure instinct. It doesn't appear sentient, it can't be reasoned with, and doesn't play games with its victims besides slipping into a familiar visage every now and then, but it never feels intentional, so it kind of works like a living virus. Viruses aren't technically living, but you get the point. So despite having similar mechanics, the trauma monster and the sex monster are on two very different wavelengths. I think having the trauma monster talk and be sentient is a smart idea, but only if it furthers the metaphor of the trauma itself. The creature should feed off it, but it should also be the trauma. And that's why the ending is so good up until the hallucination reveal. Even the entity taking the form of the boyfriend and stating that it will be around forever is great. Trauma lingers. A lot of people can't shake their trauma for good. It will always be a part of them and their history, and there's nothing anyone can do about it besides learning to carry it with them and prevent it from becoming detrimental to their lives. Trauma, in so doing, kind of becomes a companion more than a weight. An annoying one that sometimes you might forget is there, but will always make themselves known at some point. I like to think of this trauma monster, again, more as a test than a threat, and I feel like that is supported throughout the film several times. The monster first appears as a patient of Rose's that she has issues with, and when she responds negatively to it, it starts causing her to experience a whirlwind of breakdowns increasing in intensity. Later on, it appears at Rose's nephew's birthday party, where her trauma with Holly needed to be addressed. Ignoring the gifting the nephew her dead cat detail because horror movie got a horror, whatever, everything else makes sense. It all wraps up nicely in the end with the monster becoming her mother and allowing Rose to confront her trauma, accept what she did, and work to not only forgive herself, but to start making amends with those she has pushed away or hurt in her life because of this repressed trauma, including herself, her boyfriend, and potentially her sister, until that final twist ruined all that work. It's all the more devastating for Rose, but all the more annoying for viewers like me. So with that in mind, especially with the sequel supposed to be out by the time this video airs, I thought it would be fun to rewrite the ending and try to give the story a little more closure and more solid attendance to the metaphor. So I wrote up a script and I asked a few friends to act it out for me, and I'd love to share that ending with you guys to have you judge which ending is better, the originals or my interpretation. This will take place during the ending, right after the entity in the boyfriend's form says it will be with Rose forever, and then we fade to black.
Hey, Rose.
Hi.
I'm gonna talk.
Can I come in? Thank you. Where's Greg?
He's at work. It's just us.
This is really nice. Thanks for letting me come over, especially after everything.
Yeah, of course. I've been worried about you. Your breakdown, your outbursts. Still can't believe you burned down Mom's house. You used to be so protective of it.
Yeah, I really needed to talk to you about all of that, which is why I asked to come here. I had to confront a lot of things. Think about them some more. And, you were right. It was holding on to me so tightly. Like it was choking the life out of me. Like it could make me do things that I would regret. It did make me do things that I regret. So, I just wanted to apologize for that and for everything else. I haven't been a great sister to you.
Yeah, well, you were in a dark place. And I wasn't exactly the best sister to you either. But I've had a lot of other things to focus on. Like Jackson.
Not just for that. And I promise I'll make that up to you somehow. But, I mean, I forgive you, too. For before. You were right. We were just kids. You had to protect yourself. I can't blame you for that.
Well, I mean,
Holly, it's just something that I needed to say.
Is everything okay?
Honestly, no. A lot of the things that we talked about are still really difficult. Things are still following me.
Well, hopefully they'll go away eventually.
No. I don't think they ever will. And that's okay. I'm learning to live with it in my own way.
Well, I mean, that is your job, Doctor.
That was my ending for 2022's Smile. I really need to thank my friends for acting in there. That was actually my first time directing something too, so I hope you guys like it. I kind of want to do more, but anyway, time for the breakdown. I feel like it is important for Rose to continue the self-work she was doing in the original ending. After confessing her trauma and wrongdoings to her boyfriend, presuming he shows up worried about her after the entity in his form told her it'd stick with her, I feel it would make a lot of sense for her to go to her sister next and try to make amends following her previous breakdown. Now, Holly is a weird character who we don't really get to see a lot of, but in the film, she does seem rather distracted and focused in her own world, which does fit for some forms of coping from trauma. A selfish form of coping, but coping all the same. Holly's whole deal is trying to protect herself through avoidance, which can be effective as a coping mechanism, but not as a means of processing trauma, which is what Rose is finally doing in her own way. So in this instance, I had the two sisters meet up and discuss things to at least make the first steps towards moving on and finding forgiveness with each other and their situations. I feel it was important for Rose to not only apologize to Holly for her own actions, but to forgive Holly as well, with Holly maybe subconsciously needing to hear it, probably not realizing before that she needed to be forgiven herself for her own selfish tendencies. But after that, I think it's important to show that yes, the entity will be with Rose forever, true to its word. It's hers. In my interpretation, the entity is trauma. It isn't just a creature feeding off of it, but trauma incarnate. Therefore, I feel it was important for Rose to see the entity and instead of ignoring it or treating it like something to avoid or to be fearful of, that instead she needed to take a moment and acknowledge it, how she feels about it, and ultimately accept it and carry it with her on the path towards making it more manageable. It's a part of her after all, a scary, sad part that won't ever leave, but that is what is important to accept. To know that while the trauma can be detrimental and emotionally draining and concerning, that it's ultimately still livable and able to be managed in better and healthier ways, which is true for trauma of all kinds, not just extreme PTSD. Everyone will have different coping mechanisms and different support groups and different traumas, but it is important to know that trauma is and should be acknowledged and accepted. We all have some form. In a way, I guess you can view the creature as a form of extreme therapy. Literally either take the necessary steps to process and accept the trauma, or be consumed by it and hurt not just yourself, but others around you. I wouldn't say the entity is good in that regard, but that its mechanics would make a lot more sense, and it would give Rose a better ending that follows her growth and character arc. When I wrote this script, the sequel had just been greenlit, and it should be releasing around the time I release this video. So it's been a couple of years. And while I'm not really excited for it, I do hope the director, Parker Finn, can take the entity in a different direction and lean just a little bit more into the metaphor. I think that it is a very, very strong metaphor that can be explored in a wide variety of ways, not just my singular interpretation here. I don't know if I'll watch this sequel, but if I do, you'll be sure I'm going to review it. In the meantime though, let me know what you guys think of my interpretation, but I also want to know, what are your interpretations? Cerebral metaphors are fun, and the point of this is to be explored and interpreted in a variety of ways. So I want to know, what would your endings look like? On top of that, thanks for watching this new thing I'm trying. If this does well enough, I might look at doing more directing and rewriting endings with my own view. I have a lot of ideas for a whole bunch of different things to do, and directing is fun. I've had so many ideas for projects I want to do, but I don't have the manpower to do by myself, but maybe we'll see. I want to see these different things. I want to do so much. And this is something new that I'm trying, that I'm exploring. So let me guys know what you think. Maybe I'll do some more and my friends will probably want to act those out too. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. After that, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps me grow. Ring that bell so you don't miss a video. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching and have a good day. And if you're not, have a better one. See ya.
I'm just a ghost in your stereo. The fading memory of a shipwreck in the undertow. You're just a lost song. And I'm just a ghost in your stereo.